But we have a lot of different things that's happening in our community. And one of the things that Eric and I did when we first, when we first kind of noticed some things was that we had certain adjustments. We had certain things that we were responsible for in our relationship. And we found out that we were doing some things that were negative, that were creating negative patterns in our relationship.
Right.
Anybody guilty of that? Anybody gonna own that? Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Rachel. Rachel, honest one. No, I'm teasing. I see you, Gary. I see. But listen, we all have certain things that we're guilty of. And so what we want to do tonight is make space for us to learn more about the areas that we can do better in. The areas that we can actually help each other to hold each other accountable, to doing better, and of course, to having the life and the love that we know we want, we deserve, and that our children deserve and need.
Hands down.
Yeah.
So tonight, without further ado, we have the director of outreach.
Woo!
Our girl.
She is phenomenal in her own right.
Yes.
We've been knowing her. She's also our community partner. And for the last how many years?
Oh, man, I don't know. We started, 2016.
Eric had a little more black in his beard. Let's just say that.
Yes.
We got him, Nicole. We got him.
I'm a star.
All right, but we're going to hand it over to Nicole, and she's going to take it over. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you, guys. Y'all are hilarious to me. I love it. I love your spirit. I love what you stand for. Perfect. Well, I do want to say thank you guys once again. I've been knowing Eric and Elaine for quite some time. And when I tell you they are a gift to the community and the work in which they do. And I will say you guys are extremely fortunate because I shared my a little bit of my wisdom, being 57 years of age and, you know, being in relationships, being married, losing a husband through death, and being blessed to be remarried again. I've been fortunate to gain what they call wisdom. And along with that wisdom, I started working with individuals in the field of domestic violence. Can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect.
Yes.
And so one of the reasons why I got involved even with doing domestic violence is because of what Eric and Elaine just stated, working with young adults. I work in the two parts. I work in the female detention center, federal detention center, and probably 75% of those young ladies that are there because of a relationship. I also work in the juvenile detention center, and I specialize in working with young men, and it's unfortunate, but it's also fortunate because I'm there to work with them. But the one thing that young adults have said to me over my time in working in prevention and intervention is that the one thing that they don't have or see are healthy relationships. We take that for granted when we work with young adults. And we have to go back and think about when we were younger. And I always try to ask the question, and I want you to be thinking about it as I go through this presentation. Who taught you how to have a healthy relationship? And just exactly what is it? And how do you know that it's healthy, right? Because unfortunately, often enough, we take relationships that are unhealthy and we normalize it to make it healthy. And we stand by that. So I want you to be thinking about that. And if we have enough time at the end, I want someone to answer that question for me. All right, can we agree on that? So be thinking. Again, my name is Nicole Franklin Jones, and I'm the Director of Outreach for Aid to Victims of Domestic Abuse. And I've been working with ABDA going on 10 years. And when I tell you I've created a level of passion for the work that I do because I've seen the result. I've seen the result. And I want to say this, not only the result for females, because we know that 85% of women are victims of domestic violence, but also gentlemen who have had the courage to step through our doors and say, I'm also too a victim of domestic abuse. And so as I go along our presentation, feel free to raise your hand or write your questions in the chat box, and I'll do my best to stop 5 minutes prior to so that you can ask whatever questions you may want to ask. Any questions so far? All right, so a little bit about ABDA. So ABDA's mission is to end family violence by advocating for the safety and self-determination of all victims. What's interesting about that definition is because often enough, as I just stated, we think that a victim are just females. The way we define a victim, it is anyone who lives in the content of that home who feels threatened, inferior, or is intimidated by another individual who has definitely made the choice to gain power and control over anyone who's in that home. Keeping in mind, a perpetrator is determined to keep that power control with that one individual, and they'll go through anyone in order to do so. It is unfortunate, but what we do know is that anyone who grows up in a home that have experienced domestic violence, and this is the interesting part, a child that grows up that may be in the womb more so than a child who actually witnessed domestic violence either grows up to be a victim of domestic abuse or unfortunately a perpetrator. So this is the reason why when we're talking about defining family violence and we're looking at the safety and self-determination of all victims, that is anyone who can be in that household. It could be heterosexual, it could be same sex, it could be mother against daughter, father against son, and unfortunately, even elderly abuse. We also promote accountability for the abuser. To me, this is extremely important. Why? Because it's not our job at ABDA to determine why an individual has become an abuser. Because as I just stated, the abuser doesn't mean that he or she is a bad individual. We know that abusers don't have a face. It doesn't have a tax bracket. It could be you, it could be me, it could be someone who lives in a low economic community or a high economic community. But what we do know is that we have a responsibility to make the abuser accountable for his or her behavior. And we do that through our battered intervention prevention program. We also foster community-wide response to abuse. What that tells us is that we know that there's a problem in our community. And no matter where we have to go, may it be the faith community, may it be the medical industry, may it be corporate, it does not make a difference. We're on college campuses, we're in middle school, high schools. We're there to educate on what is considered healthy compared to unhealthy, because it's about breaking the cycle. And unfortunately, a lot of individuals are in a cycle that they're not even aware of. And I'm going to share what that cycle is in a second. ABDA's been providing services in the greater Houston area for over 40 years. And I say that it's fortunate, but it's also unfortunate that we've been able to extend services to Fort Bend County, Waller, Grimes, and Washington County. I say it's fortunate because we've been funded to do so, but it's unfortunate that individuals had to seek out our services because domestic violence has increased so much. So we have a lot of work to do, but I will say this, we've had progress. Number one, women and men are speaking up and speaking out unlike never before. There was a time, and some of you can testify to this, that talking about domestic violence, there was that stigma of shame. It was embarrassing. You didn't want anyone to know that you were with someone that served as an abuser. So we kept a lot of that, especially in the African-American community, we kept it within the content of our home. We might seek out a little bit of advice from our pastor, or maybe I always say Big Mama, but we were mindful of who we spoke to about domestic violence. But that has changed thanks to social media. Not only are victims looking at social media for resources, they're looking at social media for answers, but we also have survivors who are on social media saying, you have nothing to be ashamed of. You have a right to be in a healthy relationship and also understand what a healthy relationship is. We know that there are services that are out there to support victims. No one should feel as though they have to stay in an unhealthy relationship. I saw the thumb goes down. What does that mean? You got. Did you lose? Are you losing me? Or okay, we're good. Okay.
No, yeah, it's some AI things that's happening with Zoom nowadays.
You're good.
We just discovered it, but you're good.
Okay. But no one should have to feel as though they have to stay in unhealthy relationships. Now, I want to say this, and this is something new that I started adding to my presentations and trainings, especially when couples are there. There is a thing called, equally yoked. There's a thing called unconditional unconditional love, and we know that. And we know that, you know what, we do what we can to make our relationships work. So I want to make sure that we understand the difference between that and what an abusive relationship is. So when I talk about abuse, pay close attention to that, because, you know, we all go through things in our relationships and we stay in it for the sake of what we committed to. But there's a difference between that and an abusive relationship. One of the things that we are very proud of when we talk about progress, there used to be a time when we used to say, why does he or she stay, right? Instead of us saying that, because we are re-victimizing that individual, now we're saying, why does the abuser abuse, and how do we get that abuser support so he or she can stop? That's where it should have been all along, because no one wakes up and decide that they want to be in an unhealthy relationship. So I'm very proud of that progress, thanks to the #MeToo movement, because that means that that's huge progress. That means that we should not be focusing on victimizing the victim, as we should also be focusing on making sure that the abuser understands what they're doing to that individual. We're going to talk a little bit about technology being both a blessing and a curse. And we're going to get into talking about the importance of protective orders when it comes to stalking, because that's a big part of technology, and technology we know has changed tremendously. So it used to be considered a family matter, right? And I just stated, what we did in our home stayed in our home. And for me, I think that this is another level of progress, because we have to understand, when a person is determined to be an abuser, there's a systematic pattern of abuse that they go about utilizing in order to keep and maintain that power and control. And so because we know that, laws have changed. It used to be a family matter, but it's no longer a family matter. Now it's a public health issue. Because if I am the abuser and I want to dominate and control you, I don't care who or where I have to go through in order to do so. That's one of the reasons why we see on the news where innocent family members lose their life. Employees end up losing their life. Faith communities end up being slandered as a result of it. Unfortunately, even children's lives are taken. Because again, the abuser's mindset is always on power and control. And he or she don't care what they have to do in order to gain that. So as a result, laws have changed, and they're saying that when a victim picks up the phone and calls 911, someone has to be taken into custody. There used to be a time when law enforcement used to come out and serve as mediators just to make sure everyone was okay. But what they realized is that once they left, that is when the victim was at more harm of their lives being taken, and possibly, unfortunately, even children's lives being taken. So that's a law that I'm very grateful for, because again, when law enforcement come out, someone has to be taken out of that home. So I say that because I want individuals to be mindful and understand that it takes courage for an individual to say, I deserve to be in a healthy relationship, and I'm going to seek out support and help. And again, they have nothing to feel ashamed about, because that's when we start saying that term, I'm tired, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, enough is enough. That is when individuals pick up the phone, because they know what the laws have stated and they know what the consequence is going to be. One of the things that we know is that 15% of all violent crimes are by their intimate partner, hands down. When we looked at COVID, our caseload increased by 100%, because unfortunately, a lot of individuals were not quite sure that they were victims until they had to be in the home with that individual around the clock. And that's when they started seeing how things were changing, because now they had a break. We call that the freeze. There's the fight or flight and freeze. When that victim was in that freeze mode, they had an opportunity to take a break, to breathe, to regroup, to process what is taking place and put that armor back on. But during COVID, they didn't get that break. And so as a result, crime increased when it came to domestic violence. When there was a presence of gun involved, intimate partner violence increased by 500%. And we're talking about the risk of homicide, individuals' lives being taken. And that is where we saw a lot of protective orders step in, because of course, now we have more stalking that is taking place. 19% of intimate partner violence often involves either a gun or a knife, some form of a weapon. And I'm even going to go so far as to say, when we're talking about strangulation, keep that word in mind, because We're going to talk about the difference between the two. We even look at that now as a weapon, because we know that that is with the intent of taking someone's life. That is intentional thought. Calls related to intimate partner violence represents the highest number of federal calls for law enforcement officers. As a result of that, we now do law enforcement trainings. We have been funded to start training sheriffs, constables. We do new recruits that come into law enforcement, because unfortunately, that is the highest number of calls that they're now receiving. On an average, we know that a woman will leave their abusive relationship 4 to 7 times before they make their mind up that they want to leave for good. And we work with that individual because we know that that is when they're at their highest risk, unfortunately, of their life being taken. 75% of the murders are at the hand of that intimate partner when they choose to leave or attempt to leave. And one of the things that we talk about are do's and don'ts. And we talk about innocent bystanders, because if you're like me, I love my family, I love my friends. And my first instinct is to step in and help. But as we just saw on the news a couple of weeks ago, an innocent person lost their life as a result of trying to do just that, help a friend. So we talk about the do's and the don'ts and what an individual should do. And this is why this presentation is so important, and understanding what resources are out there are so important. We work and create safety plans for individuals because we know that this is not easy. Number one, it's not easy to admit that this may possibly be an unhealthy relationship, period, hands down. We also understand that when we do finally get to that point of being tired of being sick and tired, what do we do? And that's where ABDA steps in. We work with individuals and helping them create what we call a safety plan. Because when an individual decide that enough is enough and they do want a healthy relationship, we have services out there that can support and help them. We help them create that safety plan. Now, you're probably sitting there saying right now, I know somebody that can utilize this. Because number one, we don't want anyone to walk away and feel as though they still live in fear, that they have their lives or their children's lives are in jeopardy. So let this be our concern, and making sure that that individual gets the support and help that they need, okay? Now, let's jump into some interesting things to talk about when it comes to our relationship. And I say ours because none of us are exempt, including myself, period, hands down. Number one, it is not uncommon for a victim to go back to their abuser. Keep that in mind. Love is love. We can't define it. It is just that. We're going to talk about why individuals stay. So that person has nothing to be ashamed of. We know that it takes courage for an individual to walk away. We know that it also is hard for an individual to stay, to recant their story when law enforcement come out, or even bail that person out of jail, because sometimes we just don't know what to do. So we stay with that individual, which is why I'm very grateful for Eric and Elaine, because if an individual do choose to stay in that unhealthy situation, at least they're providing the tools in order to support them in doing so. And this is a huge step. That's why I'm so proud of the work in which they're doing. We cannot judge why individuals do stay. Please keep that in the forefront of your mind. When we talk about that systematic pattern of abuse, we look at all of these. Now, I know you're probably thinking, now some of these I ain't never heard of, but keep in mind, a lot of these is what, if not all of us, have gone through at one point in our life. Some of us may be experiencing it now or know someone. We call physical and sexual abuse, we call those arrestable offenses, because it's evident when law enforcement come out that someone has been physically and sexually abused, hands down, period. Emotional abuse is hidden, right? Because sometimes if we grew up in that environment, we make that emotional and psychological abuse, we normalize that. Because we don't know. We know that it doesn't feel good, but we look at it as, you know what, maybe this is what love is. So keep that in mind. And interesting enough, a lot of our victims would say, I'd rather you just hit me, just sexually abuse me, because that emotional is difficult without support and help to go away. I'm going to touch a little bit on trauma, because trauma is something that you cannot take a pill for, right? Keep that in mind. We cannot diagnose trauma when it comes to domestic violence, when it comes to someone serving as a victim. What victims do, yes, they go to therapy, and they learn how to manage it, but it always stays with you. Keep that in mind, in the forefront of your brain. Then there's that technological abuse. We're grateful that technology abuse is now being recognized in the court of law. But what's interesting is, like, victims would say that spiritual abuse, that's the one that is hidden and it creeps up on you. Because who would think that someone would take spiritual abuse, something that keeps us grounded, something that keeps us sane and whole, and utilize that as a tool in order to abuse us with? It happens every single day. And of course, we know there's financial abuse. Now we have immigration abuse, and then there's stalking. Y'all remember when stalking was sexy? I'm not the only one. When we were in high school and in college and somebody didn't want to break up with us, and we thought, ooh, I look good. That's why they don't want to let me go. Girl, I ain't worried about it. But now we cannot in 2023. Because when we talk about stalking, lives are being taken. And we're seeing more and more protective orders come across our desk as a result of stalking. Because a perpetrator in their mind look at stalking as when someone says, I don't want you, that's a form of rejection. And when they grew up in a household where they're constantly being rejected, that's another layer that's stacked on top of that. So we have to take stalking a lot more serious. So I want to give you an idea of what each one of these types of abuse are. So pay close attention to it. You can take a picture of it. I'm fine with that. But because of time, we don't have time to go into each one of them. So I'm going to start off with just physical abuse. What's interesting about each and every one of these I'm going to share with you is that a lot of individuals do not report physical abuse because they don't know that it's physical abuse. They grew up seeing these things. You know, they grew up seeing someone spit on their loved one, which I think is the most derogatory thing you can do to a person. They grew up when they saw their parents or someone that they love argue and they jumped in front of the door and they blocked it, or when that person was holding them down, or they were hitting the walls with different objects. When you see some of these things on the screen, because they don't leave physical marks, individuals do not consider these things of being a physical abuse. But I'm here to tell you that's exactly what it is. It is unwanted contact with something or someone close to your body. And these are the things that are being documented and recognized in a court of law. The one that I said I was going to pull out, because unfortunately it gets thrown out of court a lot, is strangling. Because I want someone to unmute me and tell me, what is the word that most people use? Instead of saying strangling, what is the terminology that they use?
Choke them out.
Say it again.
Choke them out.
Choking, absolutely. Thank you, Miss Flowers. I like that last name. That's cute. Miss Flowers. Exactly. They use the word choking them out. Unfortunately, choking is if I drink my water and I start coughing, right? It went down the wrong pipe, as we say. Strangling is with the intent to do bodily harm and to take someone's life. When I'm out in the community, I'm trying my best to get that word across, because we grew up in a culture where we use the word choking. And unfortunately, a perpetrator can say, she said or he said choking. I did not try to, that person was choking on an item, or they were drinking water. I was trying to save their life. So it gets thrown out of court. What we're trying to get individuals to understand is that strangling means that that person thought it through and they were intentionally trying to take that individual's life. So again, when we talk about defining and documenting, number one, documentation is key. Keep in mind, when you're working with someone or talking to a family member or a friend, listen for some of the things that you see on the screen here, because this is how we have to define physical abuse. When we talk again about strangling, if I choke on my water or a piece of corn, I don't look like this, right? This is what individuals look like. This is the signs and the symptoms. And again, we empower and encourage individuals to go to an ER or go to a 24-hour clinic, just so it can be documented. Because if you're like me, these bruises, my bruises don't show up for days in and days out. We have to understand an abuser sometimes don't realize their level of strength. Sometimes they do it as a way to intimidate or threaten the victim. But this is what comes out of them days afterwards. No matter what, no one should have to endure someone intentionally trying to take their life. And if you see on the screen, all of the side effects that occur as a result of someone trying to strangle that individual. Any questions on that? So then there's sexual abuse. What's interesting about sexual abuse is that we do a lot of documenting. And one of the things that we've come to realize is that the two things that individuals have often said that started sexual abuse, it wasn't rape or unwanted kissing and touching. That came later. It was cheating and pornography, right? So we see often we may know someone that they're chronic cheaters. And a lot of times cheating starts as a result of their obsession with pornography. Keeping in mind that this is also how human trafficking starts. We think that human trafficking is like that movie Taken, where they get off the plane and go to another country and they get kidnapped. No, it starts right there in the content of their home with someone that they love. And so often enough, pornography starts off, we call it in that soft mode, where that individual is just watching, it's for their own personal satisfaction. They invite their mate to come in. That mate may be uncomfortable with it, but because we care about our mate and we love our mate, we go along with it, right? And unfortunately, when that person becomes obsessed with pornography, that no longer becomes recreational for them. That becomes their reality. That becomes their expectation. And that becomes the things that they expect that victim to do. And when that victim do those things because they've been made to feel guilty, now they're caught into a situation that they find themselves ashamed and embarrassed and can't get out of, which is why we see now Sex Anonymous groups popping up everywhere, because a lot of individuals are aware that that has destroyed their relationships and they're seeking out support and help. That was one of the things that individuals were in denial of it. But pornography, when that satisfaction isn't enough mentally, then we start seeking out cheating. We start seeking out other partners to fulfill that, to make us feel as though that pornography is factual and not fictional. So keep that in mind. And when their partner does not perform, that is when we start seeing a lot of rape, because now we have the insulting comments, we have threatening, if you don't, someone else will. There's the begging, making that person feel guilty, or leaving the house and that person don't know where their mate is at. So when we're looking at, we're talking to someone and they're not sure, but they're venting to you, think about some of the things that you see here on the screen. And now we have a name for it, and it's called sexual abuse. Then, of course, there's that emotion. Remember I said we normalize a lot of these things? Often enough, we talk about this is where it starts for a lot of victims. This is what they grew up in. This is their household. They saw their parents' feelings being minimized or not respected. Or have you ever been in a relationship with someone don't listen, they ignore you as if your voice doesn't matter, right? And we don't think about those things, but these are the things, or someone throwing things against the wall. What you see here, or you're not feeling comfortable with sharing your thoughts and your feelings for fear of what that person is going to, how that person is going to react. This is what we call that emotional abuse. That's why I say I want you to think about who taught you how to have a healthy relationship, because if we grew up seeing this, if this was normalized, then to us, this is healthy. We don't look at this as being unhealthy. The same thing with verbal, screaming, cursing, yelling. I grew up in that household. And to me, when I saw my mother do it, to me, she was a strong Black woman. I was like, well, go ahead, Sister Soldier, do you? It was until I got older and I saw my daughter, who is actually a doctor, an MD here in Houston. I saw her treat her husband with that emotional and that verbal abuse. And that's when I had to go back and re-raise her, because generationally, I had to break the cycle, because she inherited something that she did not warrant it. And that was from every single woman in my household. I looked at it then as being strong and having strength. But as I grew older, I realized that it was simply abuse. And I had to go back and re-raise not only my daughter, but my son, who was 27 and serving his country, because I didn't want him to grow up and think that that is how a woman was supposed to treat him, because he deserves a healthy relationship just like she do, and definitely my son-in-law does as well. So we got to keep that in mind. Think about the home in which you grew up in, or think about someone you may know and how we normalize the things that you see on the screen. We talk about financial abuse, hiding money, right? A lot of victims would say, I didn't even realize what was going on. You know, I thought everything was okay until it wasn't okay, right? Until I realized that I don't even know what's going on financially into the home. And so now I'm stuck. when we talk about why individuals stay, because what are they going to do? Is either live on the streets or stay there with their children and endure the abuse. Because sometimes we don't realize that hiding money or using money for gambling or substance abuse or threatening with whole money. When we look at some of these things here, we realize that, wow, this is not what we call an equal, healthy relationship. I'm going to even go so far as to say, when it comes to elderly, one of the things that we're seeing now is not providing their medication if they don't give them their checks, in order for them to make sure that they have their monthly income given to their family members or their mate. They threaten to buy them one insulin at a time or one pill at a time. The other one that we're seeing is education, not paying for that person's education because they don't want them to get a degree. They don't want them to better themselves. If I keep you here, and I mean down here, then you will always depend on me. You will never make it to here. You will never be self-sufficient and independent. And so keep that in mind. It's not that victims want to stay. It's that for a lot of them, they don't have a choice but to stay. When we talk about that spiritual abuse, this is huge. Because when a lot of individuals get into relationships, where do you think some of them meet? In that faith community, and they're worshiping together until they realize that those verses about obey, and Eric be throwing them out there, and Elaine would be like, I don't think so. She'd be punching them back because we take those verses that were meant to be godly. Yeah, Miss Flowers is cracking up. That was meant to be godly. That was meant to be the basis of a relationship. And we're utilizing those as a way to control that individual. I am the head of my household. My husband absolutely is the head of our household. But being the head does not mean that I don't have a voice. Being the head does not mean that I have to sit in my silence and allow that person to abuse me, whether it be physically, mentally, or verbally. It doesn't mean that. And so when we're working with individuals and they're sharing with us their testimonies and they're sharing with us why they need support and help, this is some of the things that we're hearing, that I didn't think that there was a such thing as spiritual abuse. But we know that for a lot of them, we call it the hidden abuse. It comes out. And unfortunately, for a lot of individuals, this is probably the hardest one. And then there's that technological abuse. Remember I said our technology has changed for us. We're now seeing individuals being stalked and harassed through social media. Y'all remember a time when it was the pager in the house phone? So if you wanted to harass and stalk me, you're gonna have to find a quarter, a nickel, find a pay phone, and you're gonna have to wait until I do that little message on the pager. Totally different. I can destroy your life at a push of a button. While I'm sitting here having this training with you right now. And a lot of individuals feel like they're stuck. What we're seeing, unfortunately, and this is in some of our elite communities, the sexting and texting when it comes to adults. One of the things we always try to share is that nobody's that in love. We get individuals that say, just send me that neck down or that one side or that front. And we don't realize how that can come back to haunt us. We're giving an individual the leverage and the tool to make sure that we stay in that unhealthy relationship. So keep that in mind. We teach young adults that sexting and texting is illegal, but now we're starting to have to really educate adults on not sending unwanted photos because they're being utilized as a tool in order to destroy a person's life. The same with excessive texting and phone calls. When someone finds themselves being a victim, we tell them, do not respond, please, to text or phone calls. Because unfortunately, when they go to court, the perpetrator, who never stops manipulating, turns around and says, I have documentation that shows that this person was harassing and stalking me. Now, unfortunately, we have the victim serving as the perpetrator. So we have to be mindful when it comes to technology. One of the things that we just learned from working with law enforcement, they just won their first case in Waller, that this gentleman was so determined to stalk this individual that he used a drone. They got a protective order from this individual, and it took them almost a year because they could not figure out how did he know where this woman was going and who was coming to the house. She was getting her car checked for tags on a regular basis. She was getting her cell phone checked for tags on a regular basis. And it took a child to look up in the air. And the dad, he noticed it every day. He was like, Dad, there goes the thing again. And that's when they realized that it was a drone that this individual had utilized for a whole year to stalk and harass. And if we did not know, that is illegal. And so, unfortunately, after a year, this individual was charged for utilizing the drone to harass and stalk his victim. So when we talk about the mindset of a perpetrator, a person don't care what they have to do in order to dominate and control that individual. We're looking at immigration is another one. We see here on the screen that individuals are aware about a person's immigration status. And so I'm gonna say this about this one here. It does not make a difference to ABDA. If someone is not documented in this country, it is our job to support and help them no matter what. And so if you know someone that serves in that situation, make sure you refer them to us, because we have attorneys that can work with them, not only with their immigration status, but making sure that they have what they need in order to stay safe while they're here in this country. And then there's that lovely stalking that we talked about, making sure that what's interesting about stalking, a lot of this came from perpetrators. These are some of the things that they've stated, such as, yep, I would send gifts because I knew that they would forgive me. You know, I would buy them buttermilk biscuits from Red Lobster because I knew how much she loved them. And I knew that was going to keep her happy with me. They would do whatever they need to do in order to keep that person in their circle. If you got friends that they were communicating with on the same page, you know, common friends, they came around them. That person did whatever he or she needed to do because they want to make sure that some of that victim in their life was better than none of that victim in their life. And they knew if they had contact with that victim in any capacity, they were able to dominate and control that individual. All right. So again, I wanted to go over each one of those with you, and I apologize. I'm talking fast right now. I'm going to take a breath because it's really important for you to understand that how we define, how we define domestic violence back in the day is way bigger. The spectrum of it is huge. And individuals who are perpetrators are thinking outside of their box on how to dominate and control that individual. We know that 1 in 3 women would have experienced domestic violence in their lifetime, and unfortunately 1 in 4 to the point of their life being taken. We also know that 1 in 9 women would end up in ER or in primary care clinics as a result of domestic violence, because we're seeing an increase in their risk and health problems such as chronic pain. A lot of them are going in and reporting they are depressed, they have high anxiety, you know, they're starting to drink more, they're starting to use gummies more, or, you know, other type of substance in order to cope. And they're not quite sure why they are feeling the way they're feeling. And so we know that based on just in the past year, that we're seeing more individuals in the health environment come through as a result of domestic violence. We also know that 1 in 4 men would have experienced domestic violence in their lifetime, and unfortunately 1 in 9 to the point of their lives being taken, which is why we're now in the school system, we're out doing men programs, educating them on their worth, on their power, and making sure they understand what their rights are. We've been fortunate to get, not a lot, but we're fortunate to get some gentlemen who come through and say, I cannot take it anymore. I want to file for divorce, because we help with divorces, and we're seeing those cases being won in the court of law. To me, that's progress, and that is success, because it's about power and control. Remember that. And I want to send this to Eric and Elaine because I want them to share this with you. If you don't know, remember anything else, remember that a perpetrator is going to utilize, if not all the things in this wheel, they're going to utilize some of it in order to dominate and control: intimidation, emotional abuse, isolating that individual from family and friends, including their faith community, minimizing, denying, and gaslighting that individual, using children in order to keep that victim in that unhealthy situation, talking about their privilege, treating that individual as if they're less than, as if they're servants to that individual. We talked about financial, which is that economic. And unfortunately, even using coercions and threats, threatening to do harm to family, friends, pets, And unfortunately, even to themselves. We have individuals who would threaten to do just enough harm to oneself in order to make that victim feel bad so they would stay. It's about power and control. And again, we're not saying that this is a bad person. This is a person who grew up in a household where this is what they witnessed. So this is all he or she knows. So we know this when we're working with perpetrators. This is how they're going to justify it. They're going to say, I was angry. I was on a substance. It was my environment. I had PTSD from military, incarceration, including their environment in which they grew up in. Or I'm simply stressed out. Shoot, I'm stressed out because this light bill came today and it was $700. Somebody helped me pay it. But I'm not going to go into the other room and abuse my spouse. Or they talk, yes, Lord, 700. Or they have mental disorders and they didn't take their medication. All of these things equal to violence. But I want you to look at your mate and say, when we're dealing with all of this, do we equal violence? Do we do the things that Miss Nicole just shared a few minutes ago to one another? Or do we continue to love on one another and we figure it out? Because that's what a couple should do. So if you know someone that are saying or using these as justifications to equal to their level of violence, those are what we call, these are factors, and they're saying that these are causes, and causes are not a reason. So when we throw these things out, this is where the work begins. This is how we change that cycle of abuse, when we stop justifying violence in our relationships. So we utilize this in our BIP program for abusers, and we also talk to our victims, because when you're victimized so long, that victim also start utilizing these things to justify that abuser's behavior. We said, why do they stay? Well, this is why they stay, because no one taught you how to get out of this cycle. This cycle is generational for some of us. The cycle will always start with a honeymoon. This is what a perpetrator looks at when they're going through this cycle. The perpetrator says to him or herself, I'm in a honeymoon phase, whether it's a new relationship or an existing relationship. We're going to all get into a routine, right? Sometimes things just got to be consistent. Then, unfortunately, for an abuser, when that tension kicks in, because they're not used to that routine changing, right? That routine has to be consistent for them. Well, we know things change. Shoot, you get married, you have kids, people change jobs, light bill is $700. That's tension for an abuser. And when that tension kicks in, that's considered a trigger. And when they're triggered, that's when we start seeing the abuse. And then when that person comes down off of that high of gaining that power control and their reality kicks in, they're going to find ways to say, I'm sorry, forgive me. Let's figure out how to excuse it away. But what happens in this case, this continues for up to 7 times before a victim would say, enough is enough. For some, it's generational. It never stops. So you got to ask yourself, why do victims stay? Because if you stay in this cycle long enough, eventually the perpetrator is not going to give you that honeymoon period. They don't care about a routine. They don't even care if it's tension built up in the house or not. Everything is trigger abuse. And now I don't have to excuse it away because I know that you're going to stay. And you stay for fear that I'm going to either hurt you or you can't find anyone else. Or now I know that you simply love me and you hope that I will change. Or now you're just simply dependent on me financially. For some, it's pressure from family and friends. For some, it's our faith or our culture that caused us to now that choice of walking away is no longer there. Or even if you went into that relationship with high self-esteem, as a result of that abuser, you no longer have self-worth. Or that abuser is constantly intimidating you. So you are afraid to walk away because you don't have any emotional support because they've all been isolated from you. Now you fear that nobody is going to believe you. And unfortunately, some don't trust the criminal justice system. So this is why we don't judge an individual for staying in that unhealthy relationship, because they've been in this cycle for so long and no one has taught them what a cycle is, and they too have a right to get out of it. So I'm going to jump a little bit for the sake of time, but I always say this, as much as we talk about unhealthy, if we don't talk about what healthy is, even if you get out of that unhealthy relationship, you'll jump right back into another one because no one has taught you what equality is. No one taught you what a fair relationship should look like. So I would love for Eric and Elaine to share with you not only the power and control of unhealthy, but share the healthy, so you'll know exactly what it should look like when you come across it. Or if you're in it right now, you celebrate that, yes, I'm proud of the relationship I'm in because it's an equality, healthy relationship. We talk about changing the cycle. Elaine mentioned earlier, everything that we do impacts our young adults. This video first impression, I challenge each and every one of you to go on YouTube and take a look at it. Because yes, violence is a learned behavior. It's a way of that we cope and solve problems. And our young adults, more so in the womb, are more impacted than a child that's outside of the womb. And they learn what they live. So we got to be mindful of the level of trauma that we're enduring and putting on our young children's minds. So when we see them in school acting up and climbing walls, I call it the hidden victim. We have to ask ourselves, is it ADD or ADHD, or have this child been exposed to domestic violence? Why did I say that? Because they have the same signs and symptoms. And now pediatricians are now adding that to their series of questions, because we should not be putting children on medication for ADHD when we need to be putting them in therapy to deal with that level of trauma that they have experienced due to domestic violence. So we will say this, a traumatic event is not over when it's over. Keep that in mind when we're talking about trauma. Just because a person is out of it does not mean that mentally and physically it is over. We know again that individuals go into that fight or flight or freeze mode. As I stated earlier, they're trying to survive. They're doing the best that they can. Not only the adult, but also the young adult, again, the hidden victim. We know that there are resources that are out there to support you. If you did not know, if you live in any of our counties for 90 days, or the abuse occurs in our county for 90 days, and you're trying to get a divorce, as long as you're not living with the perpetrator, we can help that individual get a free FREE divorce. That is how people say, what's the catch? There's no catch. We can also help with the protective order. It doesn't have to make a difference how long they've been in the county. We do free protective orders. If someone needs their child support modified, then we can help them with child support modification or custody. If an individual has lost their child due to domestic violence and their grandparents that have inherited that child and they're trying to get custody, we have attorneys that can help them get that custody free of charge. That is a free charge. We have funds that are set aside for individuals who have a place to go and they just need substance to help them get there. We have funding that can support them in that. As I stated earlier, we can help them with creating a safety plan so they can walk away safely. We work with so many other organizations when it comes to referral sources, so they don't have to keep calling around Houston trying to find resources. We're a one-stop shop. We are out there working with so many other organizations. If they're getting a divorce through us and they want to continue their education, we actually have financial tuition assistance to help them finish their education. We have free individual and group counseling for victims, and we also have free trauma counseling, and there's no waiting list right now. And it doesn't make a difference how far back the violence has gone. All they got to do is email us or call our counselor, and we can support and help them. We go into the schools and we educate. We work in the community, as I stated earlier, and we educate. The only program that there's a fee attached to it is the BIP program, the Battered Intervention Prevention Program. A lot of individuals are mandated by court to have to attend this 18-week psychoeducational counseling group. We're the only state-accredited program here in Houston, in the state of Texas, actually. But keep in mind, we've had individuals as a result of this presentation sign up on their own and say, I have characteristics of being a batterer. Can I come in and attend the groups? Absolutely. That takes courage, and we applaud you. That's what we want. That's what we want to see happen. We have 19 groups all the way on the island of Galveston, all the way to Woodlands. And we make sure that they're on bus lines for individual to remove that excuse. This group is designed to make a person accountable for their behavior. It's not anger management. It's definitely not therapy, because a victim does not talk in front of their victim. It's not substance group. one of the reasons why we don't take individuals that are in treatment program for substance, because we cannot work with the substance. We need to work with the individual, the true person. And it's definitely not a mental health therapy group. We want to make sure that they receive whatever medication they need to be on, so they'll be able to comprehend what they're obtaining in this particular group. So again, that is the only program that is designed for the abuser. So I want to stop there and just understand that, you know, I'm going to share with you where we're located in Harris County and Fort Bend. I will share that with Eric and Elaine. This shows you a map of how spread out we are with services. And just know this, no one deserves to have to be in an abusive relationship. For a lot of us, that those bruises will fade on the outside, but that pain inside is going to last forever if that person does not get the support and help that they need. And we're here to support you. I love that Elaine and Eric are here to support you. This doesn't have to be you. It may be someone you know. And especially, again, as I stated, in our culture, I'm trying to get out there and let individuals know it's okay. We got you. Everything is going to work out. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to open it up for Q&A. So whatever questions you may have, throw them at me. Y'all, I just got my voice back yesterday. I'm not going to lie. Y'all so fortunate, because Elaine would have killed me if I had cancer.
Hello.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Nadia. Thank you for being here with us. I'm sorry, is it loud or can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I was just wondering, can I get the email to join the classes, the counseling and such? Because I know you mentioned if we email, or should we call?
Yes, I will send everything to,
Okay.
So I'm going to send Elaine now a contact number. If you guys don't mind emailing me tomorrow and reminding me to send you the power control wheels and a list of the resources. And it's actually going to be a name. I'm going to send you the director's name so that you can email her directly and you can CC me.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I had a question, Nicole. So, you know, in the picture of the man and the woman, you know, both of them in public, and they were holding, you know, being aggressive or being violent. What should we do? Because I know you mentioned earlier that there was a person who was murdered, right, for trying to step in. So what do you recommend that we, as, you know, those of the public, if we see something like this taking place?
So one of the things we tell people, there are do's and don'ts.
Let me add this right quick. Anybody saw the brick girl?
Go ahead.
The brick lady?
The brick lady that got hit in the brick, and the guys just stood around and watched her get hit?
Yes.
Okay, so that's where that question is coming from, because, you know, one of our daughters, you know, really got passionate about that. It's like, wait a minute, you know, we don't ride for our women and everything, but there is a definite risk that you take when you do that. My daddy told me, he said, listen, you going in fighting one person and you can turn around and be fighting two. You know, he told me stay out of it, but I'm gonna go ahead.
Okay, can you get that? Dang it, it keeps doing this. Can you guys see my screen really quickly? Let me duplicate. Okay. All right, can you see my screen?
No.
Not yet.
Oh, shoot.
Do we need to share it again?
Yeah, she's gone.
Yeah.
Because she's
I wanted to close this out really quickly. Give me 30 seconds. I apologize. I want you to see this. Because that right there is something that is extremely important. We want to make sure that you understand just exactly what your do's and don'ts. I'll leave it right here. Can you see this right here?
Yes, we can see that.
You can see it?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to pull it from here. So the one thing that we talk about are the 3 R's when we do trainings for organizations. And the 3 R's is recognize, respond, and refer. That's number 1. We want to make sure that we used to ignore the signs when individuals come around us. Start recognizing those signs and start listening when individuals are talking to you, and make sure that we pay attention to some of the things that they're saying, which is some of the things that I shared with you earlier, okay? We always talk about listen, believe, and validate. This is what we tell organizations: show empathy and compassion for that victim. And the key here is to maintain confidentiality. When we don't do that and we start talking about what somebody else is experiencing and that rumor gets out, that ruins their case for them, because now the story gets configured. We want to make sure we always have a list of referrals on us to say, hey, I can't tell you to walk away, but when you do, use this information. They can support and help you. The number one thing we always tell you is to document not what you think you've seen or heard, but exactly what is taking place. This is how you help a victim. And know your boundaries. Never tell a person, I'm gonna show up and take you out of that situation, because you put them in more harm. Remember I said that trauma, a person that is dealing with domestic violence, they're on that level of trauma where they're only going to give you service. They can't give you everything because they don't know how to give it to you at that moment. That young lady that lost her life was based on that person's anxiety and giving her, I'm panicking, I'm going through this. That person went in to try to save, but she did not know all the facts. So keep that in mind. You got to know your boundaries when it comes to an individual. You tell them, I know you don't deserve this, I believe you, and just let me help you get the help that you need. And so we always tell them, don't cross boundaries, don't give advice. Advice is probably the worst thing we can do to an individual, because again, you don't know the whole story. You only know pieces of it. That's why a lot of individuals' lives are taken, because we're giving them advice. We'll go to therapy, we'll try this, we'll try that, or we start judging or blaming that person for staying. Or we try to offer mediation. We cannot mediate somebody that we don't know what the mindset of a perpetrator is. And we cannot question their story or experience. So when you ask me what to do, number one, don't cross boundaries, and always have some form of a resource available, and just validate that person and document. Documentation is what saves lives. I promise you that. We have to document. You'd be amazed at how many bystanders have said, I saw it, I want to share what came across my desk, what this person has talked to me about. That goes to court. That's what we show law enforcement, and that's what saves a person's life. That's a great question.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions before we?
Any other questions? Y'all got me talking fast. I got a headache.
Yes, and we gotta look. We applaud you.
You did that thing.
You did it. Thank you. Thank you
did
for that,
that thing.
Nicole. We know that an hour is a lot to impact on this topic, especially. But thank y'all, everybody, for being here. This is,
Hands down.
you know, again, what we always say is what Nicole already mentioned, right? Even if we are not personally affected, we still know somebody. I guarantee if I ask everybody on this screen, if you know somebody who has, would every hand be up? Just let me ask, who knows somebody that's experienced any of these issues? Y'all see this? Absolutely. So this is why this is important.
Because we are the community.
Yes, yes.
That's one of the first things we have to become, is become a community.
Absolutely. And we've got Jessica. Jessica has a question.
Yes, I'm here.
Jessica? Oh, or were you just raising your hand, Jessica?
She went away.
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay,
Go
okay,
ahead, go
okay.
ahead.
No, she said she was just raising her hand.
Okay.
Okay, and so listen, what we do want, of course, is to tell Nicole, thank you. Can we just give her like an, if y'all really think that this is good information, type a 100 in the chat. Just show us some love by typing in a 100 in the chat. And yes, thank you for that, Nicole, because she does a great work, and this is a whole lot to, you know, to put in a PowerPoint presentation.
Y'all saw it was 44 slides.
Yes, yes. But real quick, did anybody learn anything new?
There's more. There's so much more.
We know that there's so much more.
Yes.
Did anybody learn anything new that you didn't know before?
I would love to hear that.
Yes. Anybody, Paulita and James, we saw y'all shaking your head. Can you share one thing that you learned new that you didn't know before? Because I know I did.
I didn't know about the spiritual abuse like that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge one. Yeah, totally huge. And so that was one. Montasia and Aaron. Yes.
Hey.
I got a question. I mean, I learned some new things, but I have a question. I was a little confused about a couple of things. When it said, what was one of the that you? I'm sorry, we got a busy one. What was the one you pointed out to me? The what was it? It was on a slide when it said it was about the abuse. I'm trying to picture the slide in my head.
It's okay. We can.
Was it the wheel? No.
No, the one when she was individual when she was breaking down the slide.
All the
know?
different things that can be done.
There was physical
Yeah.
abuse, sexual abuse, emotional.
Yeah, I think it was when I think one of the sides said leaving the house, but the other one was saying, yeah, that was one of my husband's questions. I remember that one. He was like, "How is that leaving the house sexually abused?"
So I want. Right. So think about it.
Mute so
If
we
I
can-
want you to conform to some of the acts that I chose, can you hear me? Okay. If I want you to conform to some of the acts that I want you to conform, and you refuse to do that, in the mind of a perpetrator, because he knows that that person is emotionally abused, because he's abused, she or he has abused that person. One of the things that that person was trying to do is constantly leave. They're constantly walking away from that individual. And think about it. If you're in a relationship with someone and that person is constantly leaving your home as a result of you're not wanting to do the things that they want you to do, that becomes very emotionally abusive to that individual. So that's a form of an act that a perpetrator will utilize to make sure that you conform and do the things sexually that they want you to do. If you don't, someone will, and I'll even show you that someone else will. Absolutely, you pointed right there. It's all about manipulation.
It's a mind control. I get it. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the other one, I had a couple questions for that slide. Sorry. The other one was like the alcohol and the abuse one. How did that tie into the sexually abused one? Is that more so of them taking advantage after they consume the alcohol and taking advantage of that person? Is that how that was supposed to come off?
So one of the things we have to understand, and we teach this to young adults, a lot of young adults end up getting in trouble because you cannot give consent when a person is under the influence. And so a lot of individuals will get that person intoxicated in some form of a fashion in order to get them to feel comfortable to conform to what they want. And so you think about it, you wake up, and I was in college, that ain't me. I know a couple others. Then you wake up and you are stunned about the things that you have done. So it's going to be like, relax, let's have some drinks. The perpetrator knows that if I can get you to be under some form of a substance, then I can get you to do the things that I want you to do. And unfortunately, a lot of that actually does turn into human trafficking also, because now I have proof that these are the things that you're doing. And think about somebody's status in life. Think about your life. Would you want your family members to see those things that you may not even be aware of that you did under the influence of a substance? But the perpetrator is aware of that.
Absolutely.
I can do this.
Thank you. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again, Nicole. Thank you. Thank you so much. I did see, Carrie said in the chat, many believe there is no rape in marriage. Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
Yes.
And
yes, most definitely.
yeah. And you've got some more in the chat that said thank you and it was great and enlightening.